Howdy folks, and welcome back to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. That's right, my week off is over. Boo. I was really enjoying it as well. Not everything went completely according to plan, but today at least, well, if you're watching this Mingles with Jingles on the day it goes out on Monday, yesterday was a lot of fun. Yesterday, Sunday, we went up to London for London Film and Comic Con 2017. And I thought I'd start off this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles by showing you what I got up to while I was there. In a complete reversal of what normally happens when I go to something like Tankfest, this time I was queuing up to get my picture taken with the rich and famous. That's Tricia Helfer, Canadian actress and model, probably most famous for playing Caprica 6 in Battlestar Galactica, but a lot of people also know her as doing the voice acting for Edie, the ship's AI, in the Mass Effect games. Also currently starring in Lucifer as Lucifer's mother. She's had a bunch of other TV roles as well. She was in 2.5 Men for a few episodes. She had a recurring role in Burn Notice. She's also incredibly tall. And being incredibly tall is not something that you would ever accuse Alison Hannigan of. I knew she was a bit short, but I didn't realise just exactly how much of the midget she is. Look at her. She's tiny. Alison Hannigan, of course, famous for playing Willow in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and also starring in How I Met Your Mother and the American Pie movies. Interestingly, she's exactly the same age as Tricia Helfer from the previous photograph. They're both 43, which is only 4 years younger than me. I really need to get myself a job in Hollywood. I mean, look at that. I'm 47, she's 43. I look 57 and she looks 33. I'm clearly in the wrong line of work. Next up, brown coats represent Alan Tudyk, who's probably most famous for playing Wash, the pilot of the Firefly in everybody's favourite cancelled sci-fi programme, Firefly, and also reprising the role in the movie adaptation Serenity. He's done a whole bunch of other things as well. He's currently doing a web series that's in its second season called Con Man, where he plays, funnily enough, an actor who used to play the pilot of a starship in a cancelled TV science fiction show and now makes a living going around conventions, which is kind of ironic. Although he's not short of work, he does lots and lots of voice work. Most notably, he did the voice of Sonny, the robot in the Will Smith movie I, Robot, and most recently the voice of K2SO in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Also, he's only 46, 1 year younger than me. Look at the difference. I hate him so much. Anyway, speaking of people who don't look their age, we're moving on to some of the cast of Walking Dead now. This is Emily Kinney, who played Beth. Beth was Maggie's little sister. The character that she plays is, well, at the time of the zombie outbreak, was a high school student. So the character that she plays was 17 years old. She's 31 years old. Hollywood, what is your secret? I need to know. Next up, another former Walking Dead actor. This is Stephen Yeun, who played Glenn Rhee, Maggie's husband. Born in Korea, actually in Seoul in South Korea, although his family moved to the USA when he was at a very, very early age. And you may have actually heard him speaking Korean and not realise it, because apparently he did the voices of a couple of the North Korean soldiers in Crisis and Crisis Warhead. Obviously, though, he's much more famous for playing Glenn in The Walking Dead. And it was quite funny, actually, how many people were lining up to get their picture taken with him while cosplaying Negan, Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character from The Walking Dead. And apparently there are still people out there who haven't seen the latest season. And I accidentally spoiled it for you in the last episode of Mingles with Jingles, so I won't go on any further from there, but let's just say he didn't think it was too soon. And he took it like a champ. Right, next up. A couple of actors I've been itching to meet before it was too late and they died because they are not getting any younger. This is Tom Skerritt. Now, I've always wanted to meet Tom Skerritt because he played Captain Dallas, the captain of the Nostromo, in Alien way back in 1979. Although it's possible that most of you may remember him from his role as Viper, the commander of the Top Gun training school in the movie Top Gun. But it was Alien for me. And he appeared to get a bit confused when he saw my hat. Now, obviously a lot of people were queuing up to meet Tom Skerritt wearing Alien costumes. But I decided I want to be a little bit different, and rather than wearing my Nostromo cap, I'm wearing my Narcissus cap. Now, the Narcissus was the shuttlecraft on the Nostromo But he saw me coming over to get the picture taken, and he was looking very, very confused when he was trying to read what it was on my hat. He's 83 years old, okay? I mean, let's not forget, Alien was made 38 years ago. Yeah, your time does fly. So anyway, he's looking at my hat and he's like, Narcissus? And I thought he was like, just saying, huh, not Nostromo, why the Narcissus? And I said, yeah, I just wanted to be a little different. But he was looking very, very confused. And I think it's entirely possible he didn't actually know what the Narcissus was. Because his character in Alien was killed long before they actually tried to escape in the shuttle. So it's possible that by the time he'd finished filming, and was just gone before they started filming those scenes, and so he never read any part of the script where Ripley, Lambert, and Parker are trying to get the supplies into the shuttle so they can escape the ship. Or it could just be that he's 83 years old and he's completely forgotten. Either are possible. But it was nice to actually meet somebody who looked older than me. I wish I could say the same about the next Alien cast member that I met, Veronica Cartwright, looking really good for 68. She's obviously been sipping at that Hollywood fountain of youth. Veronica Cartwright played the role of Lambert, the navigating officer on board the Nostromo in Alien. Although, apparently she wasn't supposed to play the role of Lambert. She'd actually auditioned for the role of Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's character, and the role that made Sigourney Weaver famous. And she didn't find out that she wasn't playing Ripley until she turned up on the set and was handed her costume, and it wasn't Ripley's costume. And that's how she found out she wasn't playing Ripley anymore. Now, funny old story about that. It's fairly well known that Veronica Cartwright and Sigourney Weaver did not get along with each other. I mean, Veronica Cartwright was a successful actress. She'd starred in Invasion of the Body Snatchers the year before with Donald Sutherland and Jeff Goldblum and Leonard Nimoy. And Sigourney Weaver, up until that point, hadn't done anything. She'd worked in theatre, on stage, and that was pretty much it. So there was a little bit of resentment going on there, and Ridley Scott took full advantage of that in one particular scene. Right after Veronica Cartwright, Tom Skerritt and John Hurt's characters are returning to the Nostromo after being on board the wrecked alien ship, and John Hurt's character, Kane, has been infected by a facehugger. Ripley refuses to let them back on board because of quarantine restrictions. Her orders are countermanded by the ship's science officer, Ash, who just lets them in the airlock anyway, in direct contravention of Ripley's orders. Veronica Cartwright's character, Lambert, is supposed to be pissed off, and as soon as they strip out of their spacesuits, she has to attack Ripley. They're standing in one of the corridors on the Nostromo, and she's supposed to try to punch her. The director, Ridley Scott, wasn't really getting the aggression out of that particular scene that he wanted, so he took Veronica Cartwright aside and says, look, the next time we shoot, I really want you to lean into that punch and let her have it. Oh boy, she did. If you watch that scene again, she smacks her right in the face and knocks her off her feet. And it surprised Sigourney Weaver so much, she instantly burst into tears and started crying, for real, and went for her. And if you ever watch interviews with Veronica Cartwright about that scene, it's very, very obvious that she relished every single second of that punch. There wasn't a lot of acting going on there. She really wanted to smack her in the face. Well, anyway, we're almost done. There was one other person that both Rita and I had been itching to meet. He played opposite Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry as the villain of the movie, the Scorpio serial killer. He did such a good job of playing a psychopath in Dirty Harry that after the film's release, he started getting death threats from, crazy people who can't tell the difference between movies and reality. Unfortunately for Andrew Robinson, after playing the Scorpio Killer in Dirty Harry and Frank Cotton in Hellraiser, he kind of got typecast as a psycho, and he found it really hard to get work in anything other than increasingly low-budget horror movies. And then Star Trek came to his rescue, and this is probably what most people know him from, although you wouldn't recognise him because he was wearing lots and lots of makeup, for the role of Elim Garak on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the Cardassian spy, assassin, and tailor. He didn't audition for the role of Garak. He was actually trying for the role of Constable Odo, which went to Rene Auberjonois instead. But he was forced to take the role of Garak against his better judgment because, well, basically he really needed the money. And it's probably just as well that he did, because it kept him gainfully employed for 9 years and made him a firm fan favourite. I love Deep Space Nine. And the reason I love Deep Space Nine in particular, above all of the other Star Trek series was because, unlike almost all of the other Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine wasn't all just about the captain. Every single character in Deep Space Nine was strong. And it would be really tough for me to pick a favourite, but if I had to, it would be Andrew Robinson's Elim Garak. Just plain simple Garak, the Cardassian tailor, who isn't quite as plain or as simple as he might want you to believe. So, that's what I got up to this weekend. It's not all I've been doing in my week off, however. I've been playing some new games, some very, very new games. The kind of games that you wouldn't normally expect to see me playing, and you certainly wouldn't expect to see me putting up on YouTube. This is one of them. It's called Refunked. As you've probably figured out by now, it's a 3D platform game, and I'm not really known for playing 3D platform games. In fact, I don't play 3D platform games. I think the last game that I played that could possibly be described as a 3D platform game was the original Tomb Raider. And it's a mark of how good I think this game is that I played it and completed it. I would hesitate to recommend it, however. I mean, it's very, very cheap. It's an independent game that I got on Steam. It only costs £2, so, you know, pocket change. But it's very, very short. There's only one level. It's big, and it's what they call a peaceful 3D platform game. And what that means is you can't die. So a fall won't kill you. You won't drown if you end up in the water, for example. It's not very long, however. I mean, I suck at these kind of games, but I completed it in about 20 minutes. And the replayability value is 0, but still, it's only £2. What I liked about it, though, was that it is so relaxing. This game really chilled me out. It's very simple. You just colour in the blocks by landing on top of them, and you activate a new series of blocks by jumping on top of the red button. You can see which blocks you've activated and which ones you haven't, because of the ones that you've activated, the tops turn green, and if you're down on ground level and you can't actually see the top, then the sides of the block are grey, and the blocks that you've activated are brown. And that's it. You just keep activating blocks until you've activated 100% of them. It's not complicated. And I think that's why it's so relaxing, because it's not that difficult. You can get stuck, but you can usually always see where it is that you need to go. You just have to figure out how you're going to get there. There's no tension, because you're never in any danger of dying. At the very worst, you're just going to be sitting there thinking, right, how do I get to the top of that block? And sometimes you can't get to the top of the block until you've explored a bit further and popped some other blocks by jumping on the next red button. Because in order to get to the top of an existing block, you sometimes need to raise other blocks. And that is pretty much it. It doesn't take long. I mean, even if you're a complete noob at platform games like me, it only took me about half an hour to complete the whole thing. But it was £2 well spent, let me just put it that way. It is very, very cheap. Refunked, available on Steam. It's one of 3 new games that I've been playing on Steam lately. This, First Strike Final Hour, which was last week's Casual Saturday video, and Domina, which I've been playing on the live stream and also streamed during the week off. Oh, one thing that I was supposed to do during the week off but never got around to doing. The War and Peace Show. Did not attend the War and Peace Show this year. Was supposed to go on Wednesday, but Rita wasn't feeling too good on Wednesday. And the reason that I'd wanted to go on Wednesday was because I'd looked up the weather forecast for the week. And pretty much every day after Wednesday, it was just rain, 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 rain. Now, the War and Peace Show is great, and if you can attend it, I definitely recommend that you do. Take some money along, because there are lots and lots of retailers selling lots and lots of militaria. You can even buy yourself a tank. In fact, the last time I went to the War and Peace Show, they were selling a Comet for the knockdown price of £300,000. It's the world's largest collection of military vehicles. It's not just tanks, there's lots of unarmoured military vehicles there as well. Hundreds of them. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who attend the War and Peace Show. But the thing you have to understand is it's basically just a big field. A very, very big field full of hundreds of military vehicles and thousands of people. Now, I planned to go to the War and Peace Show on Wednesday, but Rita wasn't feeling good. So we didn't go on Wednesday. Thursday, I had to travel to London to check into a hotel overnight for the Creative Assembly press brief for Warhammer 2. That was Friday. Saturday was the only other free day to go and see the show, because on Sunday we were going to London Film and Comic Con. The only problem was, It rained all day on Thursday, it rained all day on Friday, and Saturday was forecast thunderstorms. And the War and Peace show is basically a big field that's had hundreds of armoured and unarmoured military vehicles driving around in it, as well as thousands and thousands of people. And after 3 days of rain, it was going to look something like the Eastern Front in the spring. And I just said, what's today's weather forecast on Saturday morning? Thunderstorms. Nope, not gonna do that. Rita, of course, is made of sterner stuff, or she thinks she is, so she decided she was going to go anyway, even if I was staying at home. Now, I'm not saying she didn't enjoy it, right? It was because it's the War and Peace show, and it's always great. But she came back feeling very cold, wet, and sorry for herself. And then, of course, had to get an early night because the next day we were up at 5 o'clock to drive up to London for London Film and Comic Con. We went up with faithful but incompetent camera minion Eddie, who also had a bunch of people that he wanted to meet when he was there. And Eddie decided that since he was driving, it's his rules, we were going to be leaving good and early. So we were on the road 6 o'clock Sunday morning. Now, I can kind of understand his reasoning, because London can be a nightmare if you're driving. But we got there 2 hours before the doors opened, which meant that we didn't have any trouble whatsoever finding somewhere to park. But it was 7:30 on a Sunday morning, and London may be a teeming metropolis, but there's nothing open at 7:30 on a Sunday morning in London. Not even a coffee shop. So let's just say I'm glad I took a book along because there was nothing to do for 2 hours. Speaking of books, I've been doing a lot of reading in my time off as well. I do a lot of reading anyway. Something I always recommend. Nothing wrong with reading. And one that I've been itching to read for a while. It's been sitting on my Kindle for some time, but I've had other books to finish. It's called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. And it's a 100% true story. Such a thing actually existed during World War II. In fact, Sir Christopher Lee was a member, yes, Christopher Lee, Dracula, Saruman, that Christopher Lee, he was a member of the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. What the hell is this, Jingles? It's something that could only happen in Britain in the 1930s. And I want to finish off this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles reading you just some selected pieces from the first chapter of the book. You ready? You sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. Cecil Clarke viewed his caravan with the sort of affection that most men reserve for their wives. More than 14 feet in height, it stood taller than a London double-decker bus, and its low-slung chassis was a revolutionary piece of engineering. But the real joy of Cecil's creation was its luxurious interior. It came with a lavatory, bedrooms, and an ensuite bathroom. It had hot and cold running water and its own home-built generating plant. It also had a well-stocked bar. He'd built it in his workshop behind the family home in Bedford. At weekends he would hook it to the family charabanc, whatever the hell that is, and take it on road trials, hurtling through the local country lanes, while his wife Dorothy clutched the dashboard and their 2 sons John and David made mischief in the back. What's this got to do with World War II, Jingles? Wait, trust me, it's going to be worth it. You're not going to believe this, it's amazing. In the summer of 1937, Clarke had submitted an advertisement for inclusion in his favourite magazine, Caravan and Trailer. Describing his vehicle as a 3-berth living van of the most advanced design, it even had a servant's quarters at the rear. The editor of Caravan and Trailer was a man named Stuart McRae, who was an aviation engineer by training, who'd fallen into the world of journalism by accident. He was quite intrigued by the pictures of Clarke's outlandish caravan, and decided to pay a visit to Bedford, taking the day off work in order to meet him. I'll cut a very long story short here. McRae was very, very impressed with Clarke's new caravan, and when he was back at work the following morning, he wrote an article about Clarke's extraordinary prototype, and there the story might have ended, for Stuart McRae quit his job at Caravan and Trailer soon afterwards and took up a position as editor of Armchair Science. And it was while working as editor of Armchair Science that he got a phone call from a man called Millis Jeffress. Jeffress said he was keen to find out more about one of the items featured in the latest issue of Armchair Science. You have an article about a new and exceptionally powerful magnet. I want full information about this magnet right away, please. McRae was taken aback by the caller's gruff manner and asked to know more. Well, it's a bit awkward, admitted Jeffries. I'm not at liberty at present to tell you what this is about. He suggested that they meet for lunch and talk it over in private. 48 hours later, McRae found himself in the Art Theatre Club, seated opposite one of the most extraordinary individuals he had ever met. Jeffries explained that he worked for a highly secret branch of the War Office, one that specialised in intelligence and research. With international tensions on the rise, Hitler had just annexed the Sudetenland, he'd been tasked with devising unconventional weaponry that might be needed in the near future. His interest in magnets stemmed from a revolutionary underwater mine that he was trying to develop. Its explosive charge was coated in magnets and equipped with a time delay detonator. The idea was that it would stick to the side of a ship when placed there by a diver and go bang in due course and sink the ship. The need for such a weapon was real and urgent. Less than 6 months earlier, in the winter of 1938, Hitler had launched his Plan Z, the immediate and dramatic strengthening of the German Navy. Senior figures in the War Office and the Admiralty had decided that sinking German ships would be a lot more cost effective than building new British ones. But Jeffries faced an insurmountable problem. He was unable to find magnets that would work underwater, and he was also too busy to build a reliable time delay detonator. Without one, he knew that his half-built magnetic mine wouldn't work. After a well-lubricated lunch finished off with goblets of brandy, McRae offered to take over the project. Just like that. One of his previous jobs had been designing bomb-dropping mechanisms for low-flying aircraft, so he was more than willing to tackle this new challenge. Jeffries was surprised by McRae's offer, but very glad to accept. He said, "I have a private bag of gold from which I can pay your expenses." It was only later in the day, when the mists of brandy had cleared, that McRae began to regret his decision. He didn't have a clue how to build a magnetic mine, and he didn't even have a workshop in which to experiment. As he pondered how best to proceed, he was suddenly reminded of Cecil Clarke, his prototype caravan, and his garage in Bedford. So he called his company, and without revealing who he was or why he was calling, arranged for a meeting. The following morning, he pitched up at 171 Tavistock Street, Bedford, with a bag full of magnets and a cry for help. Clarke was delighted to renew his acquaintance with McRae, for the two men had gotten along famously when they'd first met. This time around, McRae was invited into the Clarke family home and offered a snack. Sweeping a number of children out of the living room, he later wrote, which also had to serve as an office, he filled me up with bread and jam and some awful buns, and then got down to business. Clarke showed characteristic enthusiasm from the outset, informing McRae that lethal weapons could be constructed from the simplest pieces of equipment. McRae was never less surprised to find that their first port of call was the Woolworths store on Bedford High Street. Here they bought some large tin bowls. Next they visited a local hardware store and bought some high-powered magnets, and then they took everything back to Tavistock Street, where Clarke created an experimental department by sweeping a load of rubbish and children off a bench. Clarke took to the task in hand with relish. He commissioned a local tinsmith to make a grooved metal ring that could be screwed onto the Woolworths bowl. When this was done, he poured bitumen into the ring and used it to secure the magnets. His idea was to fill the bowl with blasting gelatine and then screw on a makeshift watertight lid. The key factor was to make the mine light enough to stick to the side of a ship. Eventually, after using up all the porridge in the house, yes, porridge, I'm not making this up, right? After using all the porridge in the house in place of high explosive for filling, juggling about with weights and dimensions, and flooding Clarke's bathroom on several occasions, they got it right. It was one thing to design a weapon, quite another to make it work. So Clarke and McRae took themselves off to Bedford's swimming pool, and after explaining to the janitor that they were conducting vital military research, obtained permission to use the main swimming pool once it was closed to the public. They propped a large steel plate in the deep end, and then strapped the welded Woolworths bowl to Clarke's ample stomach. Looking as if he was suffering from advanced pregnancy, he would swim to and fro, removing the device from his belt, turning it over, and plonking it on the target plate with great skill. It worked perfectly. The mine stuck to the metal plate each time and remained securely in position. There was just one thing missing. A bomb couldn't explode without a detonator, and the detonator for this particular weapon had to be absolutely reliable. If it exploded too early, it risked killing the diver. Clarke set about designing a spring-loaded striker that was held in a cocked position by a soluble pellet. When the pellet dissolved in the water, the striker would hit the detonator and the bomb would explode. But finding a suitable pellet proved to be difficult. The two men tried all manner of devices, but none of them worked in a satisfactory fashion. Pellets made of powder dissolved too quickly. Pellets that were too compact didn't dissolve at all. In the end, it was Clarke's children who provided the solution. As Clark swept them off his workbench for the umpteenth time, he upset their bag of aniseed balls, and dozens of sweets rolled across the floor. McCrae popped one into his mouth and began playing with it on his tongue. As he did so, he was struck by how it shrank in size with absolute regularity. It was exactly what was needed. Clark rigged up his strikers to the children's aniseed balls, while young John Clark looked on, very upset at seeing his sweets misappropriated. Each spring-loaded striker was placed in a big glass Woolworths tumbler and put through a series of tests until Clark had worked out the exact time it took for the sweet to dissolve. "Right, that's 35 minutes, he'd shout across the living room. Sure enough, the aniseed ball would slowly dissolve over the course of half an hour until the striker was suddenly released. There was no explosive charge, so the damage was confined to the glass, which invariably shattered and fell to the floor in pieces. Mrs. Clark spent her afternoon sweeping up bits of broken glass. The men were delighted that their idea had worked, and so the next day the children of Bedford had to go without their aniseed ball sweets, for not wishing to be held up for supplies, they toured the town and bought all of them." The last remaining problem was to find a suitable means of storing their magnetic mine. It was essential that the aniseed ball be protected from damp, otherwise the mine risked exploding in storage. And so their solution was once again homespun but inventive. They pulled a condom over the striking mechanism and found that it formed a perfect damp-proof sleeve, expanding neatly over the various bumps and creases. Thus it was that two middle-aged gentlemen found themselves walking around Bedford, going from chemist to chemist, buying up their entire stocks of condoms and earning themselves an undeserved reputation for being sexual athletes. And that is how the limpet mine was invented. That apparently is how you got a defence contract in Britain in the 1930s. It is just so gloriously British a story. Bunch of amateurs that, almost by accident, using components that they bought in Woolworths and children's sweets, built limpet mines. When you hear stories like this, you start to wonder, how the hell did Germany lose? I mean, that's Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. That's the book I'm reading at the moment by Giles Milton. I absolutely cannot recommend this book enough. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I'm back. My week off is over. Normal service has now been resumed. We're going to be getting the videos pumping out starting tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed your weekend, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.